I'm 88 years old, and there are 3 words I never said that have followed me longer than anything else in my life. They weren't dramatic words, they weren't poetic, just simple ones. But I didn't say them when it mattered, and now the people I should have said them to are gone. At 88, you wake up knowing there isn't much runway left. The mornings are quieter than they used to be. Most of the people who knew you when you were young are gone. When I look around my small living room, I see photographs more than I see people. I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy. I'm telling you because when you get to this age, you start sorting through what really mattered and what didn't, and some realizations come too late to be useful to you, but maybe not too late for someone else. When I was a young man, I thought love was understood. I thought if you showed up every day, went to work, paid the bills, kept the lights on, that was enough. Words felt unnecessary, almost embarrassing. My father was the same way. He never said much. He worked at a steel plant for 32 years, left before sunrise, came home tired, ate quietly, fell asleep in his chair. He wasn't cruel, he just wasn't expressive. That's the word people use now. Back then, we just called it being a man. I don't remember him ever saying he loved me, not once. And I told myself it didn't matter. I knew he did. He worked hard, he never missed a payment, he kept a roof over our heads. That was his language. So when I got married at 24, I carried that same language into my own home. Her name was Margaret. She laughed easily. That's the first thing I noticed about her. She had this way of tilting her head back when she laughed, like she wasn't afraid to take up space in the world. I loved her from the start. I just didn't know how to say it properly. In the beginning, I did say it sometimes. Newlyweds do. It feels natural then. But after a few years, life got louder. I took a job in accounting, stable, respectable, long hours. I told myself I was building something for us, for the future. Margaret would wait up for me at the kitchen table, sometimes with a cup of coffee gone cold. She'd ask how my day was. I'd give her a summary, numbers, deadlines, office politics. Then I'd ask about dinner. It sounds terrible when I say it like that, but at the time it felt normal. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl. I held them both in the hospital and felt something crack open inside me. I remember looking down at my son's tiny fingers wrapped around mine and thinking, I will protect you from everything. But protection became my only language again. I worked harder, took on extra projects, missed little things, school plays, a soccer game, a parent-teacher meeting. There was always a reason, always something that couldn't wait. I remember one evening my daughter standing in the doorway of my home office. She was maybe 8. She had a drawing in her hands. "Daddy, can you look?" "Just a minute," I said. That minute turned into 20. Then she wasn't there anymore. I found the drawing later on the kitchen counter, a stick figure family, me drawn taller than the rest, standing slightly apart. I told myself she understood. Kids are resilient, I thought. Margaret would sometimes say, "They miss you," and I would answer, "I'm doing this for them." That sentence followed me for decades. I'm doing this for them. It felt noble, responsible. What I didn't see was how it was also a shield. Margaret tried, in her quiet way, to tell me she needed more. Not money, not security, just me. She'd sit beside me on the couch and rest her head on my shoulder. I'd pat her hand absent-mindedly while watching the news. One night she said, "You know, you don't talk to me much anymore." I remember feeling defensive. I was exhausted. I worked 10 hours that day. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, not angry, just tired. "Anything," she said finally. "Anything." It seemed so vague to me then, so unnecessary. I thought our life spoke for itself. Years passed like that, not unhappy, just busy. We celebrated anniversaries, took family vacations once a year, took pictures, smiled in them. But there were conversations we never had. I never told my father that I forgave him for being distant. I never told my mother that I noticed how much she sacrificed. I never told Margaret that sometimes I would sit in my car after work for 5 extra minutes just to prepare myself to be present, and that I was sorry it felt like a chore. And I never told my children that I was proud of them in specific, detailed ways. I said, "Good job." I said, "That's nice." I didn't say, "I see how hard you tried." Those differences matter more than you think. The first loss came quietly. My father had a stroke at 72. He was in the hospital for 3 days before he passed. I stood beside his bed, machines humming, his chest rising and falling unevenly. There were things I meant to say. I meant to tell him I understood him better now, that I knew he did the best he could with what he was given. But I stood there, hands in my pockets, and said nothing important. He died that afternoon. At the funeral, people said he was a good man, a provider, a steady presence. They were right. But I drove home with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with grief alone. It was the silence, the words unsaid. I told myself I wouldn't make the same mistake again. But habits don't break because you promise yourself at a graveside. They break slowly, and only if you notice them. I didn't notice quickly enough. Margaret got sick in her late 60s, cancer, the quiet kind that grows without announcement. By then, the children were grown, out of the house, living their own busy lives. The hospital room where she stayed during treatment had a window that overlooked a parking lot, not much of a view. I would sit beside her bed and talk about practical things, doctor visits, medication schedules, insurance. She listened, nodded. One evening, she reached for my hand and asked me, "Are you scared?" I should have said yes. I was terrified. But I said, "No, we'll get through this." It sounded strong, supportive. It wasn't honest. She studied my face for a moment, and then she squeezed my hand. "I've loved you for a long time," she said. It wasn't dramatic, just simple. I nodded, and I said, "I know." That is one of the 3 sentences I would give anything to take back. She died 6 months later. The house became unbearably quiet. I would walk from room to room and feel like a guest in my own life. Her side of the closet still smelled faintly like her perfume for a while. I would stand there longer than necessary, just breathing. And that's when the full weight of it began to settle in. All the later conversations, all the "I'll say it tomorrow" thoughts. Tomorrow is not a promise. It's a guess. At 88, I understand that now in a way that is almost physical. The words I wish I had said weren't complicated. I'm sorry. I was afraid. I love you, and I don't say it enough. They feel small when you're young. They feel enormous when it's too late. I still talk to her sometimes, sitting in my chair by the window in the evenings. I tell her things now about how proud I am of our children, about how lonely it feels without her laugh in the house. But the air doesn't answer back, and that's the part no one prepares you for. After Margaret died, the house stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like storage. Storage for furniture, storage for memories, storage for things I hadn't said. The children came often in the beginning. They brought casseroles, they fixed small things around the house, they stayed overnight so I wouldn't be alone. I remember watching my son wash dishes at my kitchen sink, his hair already turning gray at the temples. I had missed when that happened. I wanted to say something meaningful to him, something that reached across all the years I had been busy. Instead, I told him where we kept the extra sponges. It sounds almost laughable, but that's how distance continues, not through cruelty, through habit. One afternoon, a few months after the funeral, my daughter stayed behind after everyone else left. We sat at the table where Margaret used to wait for me. She looked at me for a long time before speaking. "Dad," she said gently, "did you love Mom the way she loved you?" The question didn't accuse, it didn't blame, it just sat there between us. "Yes," I said immediately. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. "You just didn't always say it," she said. There it was, quiet, direct. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, not defensiveness this time, just recognition. "I thought she knew," I said. "I think she did," my daughter replied, "but sometimes knowing and hearing aren't the same." We sat in silence after that. I looked at my daughter and realized she had grown up in the same emotional climate I had, practical, responsible, reserved. I had passed it down without meaning to. That night, after she left, I walked into the bedroom Margaret and I had shared for 45 years. I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself say it out loud. "I loved you." The words sounded fragile in the empty room. That was the second sentence I wish I had said more often. The third one took me even longer to admit. I was wrong. Not wrong about working hard, not wrong about providing, wrong about thinking love could be assumed, wrong about believing silence was strength, wrong about waiting. A year after Margaret's death, I had a minor heart attack. Nothing dramatic, just enough to land me in a hospital bed with wires attached to my chest. Hospitals have a way of clearing the noise. You lie there and realize how small your world has become. A curtain, a monitor, a nurse who calls you Hun. My son came to see me. He stood at the foot of the bed, hands in his pockets, the same way I used to stand beside my father's. I saw it then, the inheritance of posture, of restraint. He asked how I felt. "Fine," I said, automatically. He nodded. We were repeating something neither of us had chosen consciously. "Sit down," I told him. He pulled up a chair. I looked at him for a long moment, trying to gather something I should have gathered decades ago. "I'm proud of you," I said. He blinked, surprised. "I know,"
he answered quickly. And for the first time in my life, I didn't let that be enough. "No," I said, "I don't think you do." He didn't speak. "I'm proud of the way you stayed with your mother in the hospital when I couldn't. I'm proud of how you raised your kids. I see how patient you are with them. I wasn't always like that." His face changed, just slightly, like a wall had been nudged. "Dad," he started, but his voice caught. "I'm sorry," I added. There it was, the word that had sat in my throat for years. "I'm sorry I wasn't there more. I thought I was doing the right thing. Maybe I was, in some ways, but I missed things, and I can't get those back." He looked down at his hands. "I never thought you didn't care," he said quietly. That sentence nearly broke me, because not being uncaring isn't the same as being present. We talked longer that afternoon than we had in years. It wasn't dramatic, no tears streaming down faces, just honesty, plain and steady. When he left, he squeezed my shoulder, not quickly, not out of obligation, and I realized something. It's not that words fix everything. They don't bring people back. They don't erase missed birthdays or unattended school plays, but they clear the air before it turns stale. I'm 88 now, and most of my days are simple. I wake up early, I make coffee for one, I sit by the window and watch the neighborhood start its morning. Sometimes I think about the younger version of myself, the man rushing out the door with a briefcase, believing urgency was the same as importance. I don't judge him as harshly as I used to. He loved his family. He just thought love was proven through effort alone. What I wish I had understood is that effort without expression can feel like absence. You can be in the house and still be far away. You can care deeply and still leave someone wondering. If I could sit across from Margaret one more time at that kitchen table, I wouldn't talk about work. I wouldn't talk about schedules. I would tell her I was scared sometimes. I would tell her I admired how steady she was. I would tell her I noticed the way she held the family together when I was too distracted to see it. And I would say clearly, without nodding instead of speaking, "I love you. I love you more than I have been able to show." That's what I wish I had said before they died. To my father, "I understand." To my mother, "Thank you." To my wife, "I'm sorry and I love you." 3 sentences, that's all. When you're young, you think life will offer you endless chances to say small things. You assume there will always be another dinner, another visit, another quiet moment before sleep. But the ordinary evenings are the ones that disappear first. There is no music when the last opportunity passes, no announcement, just a regular Tuesday that becomes the final one. I don't say this to frighten you. I say it because at 88, the weight of unsaid words is heavier than the weight of mistakes I made openly. Mistakes can be discussed. Silence just lingers. If this story means something to you, you don't have to change your whole life tomorrow. You don't have to become someone else. Just don't assume they know. Say it, not loudly, not perfectly, just clearly. And if you're willing, tell me, have you ever held back words you wish you'd spoken? I won't be here forever. None of us will. But tonight, before I go to sleep in this quiet house, I'll say their names again. I'll say the words again. Not because it fixes anything, but because it feels honest. And at this age, honesty is all I have left.